With patch 3.12, we see some major changes to the way Smite is played, especially Conquest. This video is intended to sum up all these changes without you having to watch or read the patch notes in detail, just to give you a basic understanding of what will change for you and your role. I will go through the specific classes and the roles in Smite first, and after that we'll be looking at specific items and other changes. Let's begin with the Hunters. Golden Bow is removed from the game, so the Hunter meter will drastically shift. We'll most likely not see too much of Artemis anymore, and quite a few ability hunters will come back instead, for example Ullr. These guards benefit from Transcendence more, and Transcendence will probably come back into the meta. Along with it, Heartseeker got a buff, so we'll probably see that more as well. It's too early to speak in absolutes about hunter builds, but generally not too much should change aside of Golden Bow being removed. Maybe we will see Ritual Dagger occasionally as a new item, but mostly you will stick to most of the same items. For example, Solido is still in the meta, the crit items are and Kins is. So overall, what changes is the beginning of the game, which means that other hunters will be differently effective. Jingwei is probably not out of the meta, different from what a lot of people say, because her 2 includes basically the same passive as Golden Bow had before, so don't worry about that too much. Hunters are countered harder by Thorns, as well as the new improved Sunder now. At the same time, they may benefit from the new relic called Phantom. The changes for Guardians or supports are relatively low. You'll probably occasionally see Ritual Dagger being picked up because it's a really strong item overall, and maybe Emperor's Armor. The item has relatively bad stats for the price, but the passive may be worth it in the end. Most likely not though. Also, we might see a change in relics, for example, due to the fact that Frenzy got a new buff, Sprint got a nerf, Scout got some changes, and Curse got a nerf. So overall, Guardians didn't see too many changes themselves, but the relics may have an impact. Once again, it's too early to say which relics exactly. It's unlikely that Scout will become meta though. Hand of the Gods might be picked up by Guardians again, or Wrath it is called now, but most likely not. One Guardian you will see more again is Sylvanas, simply because of the buff to his Verdant Growth, which is pretty good for overall, especially for mana-hungry hunters. Now that mana is more important again due to clear being more important, Sylvanas might see a bit of a comeback. Mages in mid lane are probably the least affected by this patch. The only item that may have an impact for them is Ancile, simply because it now counters their spells a little bit, but only if the enemy is close range, so that can be risky in ganks. And the only relic that is kinda interesting in context of Mage's Wrath, because it means that you could get aggressed on very early by the jungler. Some mages may be able to make use of Ritual Dagger, and generally we will see less of Raging simply because of the magical defenses nerf, a lot less of Ao Kuang because he's really hard countered by Ancile and he's got an additional nerf on top of that, and more of Vulcan because he's got a pretty great buff for himself going. A particular subclass of the mages, the healers, will be seen more though. Weakening Curse's healing reduction was lowered, and all healing mages are kinda buffed in a way or another. Especially Hell got decent amounts of buffs, and will probably be seen a lot more, along with the new relic which allows her to get through walls, which were always one of the worst things to struggle against as Hell, with a lack of real escapes. At the same time, Chang'e got a little buff, but probably won't have that much of an impact. And Aphrodite got a decent buff, but I think the one that we'll see most compared to before will be Hell. For solo laners, specifically warriors, quite a fair bit can change this patch. Runeforged Hammer got a buff, and it's up to the players to make that work and utilize it properly, but it could have a major impact on certain guards. The already mentioned Emperor's Armor, which slows down tower shots and speeds up your own, may be picked up by solo laners as well. Once again, it's a question of stats. Ritual Dagger could help solo laners too, depends on the guard really. What's more important are the guard changes here. First of all, Erlang Shen is introduced, so in your casuals we will see a lot of that guy, and his solo potential is pretty damn decent. At the same time, Odin got a buff, and will probably be seen more as well. You have to keep in mind that there's an active that counters him now, but at the same time his new passive is pretty brutal and may lead to him being picked a lot. We'll have to see how well it works out in practice. Guan Yu got some kind of buff, but he's in a bit of a weird place, and it may actually affect his solo performance in a negative way. Once again, it's too early to really say that, because his teamfight potential should be great, But from what I've found out on PTS, you really struggle to get to the new number of stacks on his passive, and that way you're kind of less effective, and then you want to save up your stacks to use it for the proper ability, and it kind of makes you less effective overall, in my opinion. But we'll see, maybe someone finds a way to abuse that, so maybe expect some more Guan Yu as well. And with that, we're moving on to assassins or junglers, which have probably seen the most changes this patch, even though a lot of them went directly. Ratowska got some nerfs, so we'll see him a little less. Najjar got a weird buff nerf combo, which means he'll be very different to play. I don't know if you'll see him much, yet to find out. Then Arachne got some kind of buff-ish thing, mostly a buff, which means we'll probably see her more. Once again, Ao Kuang, if we talk about assassins, he's basically an assassin as well, will probably be seen less. And overall, jungle will feel different because of the new Wrath. I'm very certain that Wrath will be picked up a lot, even before Purification, simply because it's such a good item now. It allows for clear, it allows for early objective steals, it allows for hard CC on guards that don't have it. So this helps especially those junglers who struggle with early clear, for example Nemesis and so on, effectively buffing them. In that very tone, I would like to point out that Mercury is not as bad off as people say he is. Yes, his laning is worse without Golden Bow, but his jungle is probably better simply because he's got the access to Wrath and it's a very good item for him. So I don't think that we'll actually see less of Mercury, rather maybe even more. Especially because we have this new item, Ritual Dagger, which will basically benefit all junglers, but especially Mercury because he benefits from the movement speed additionally. So not only will the actives of junglers, assassins change, but also the item builds because we'll see Ritual Dagger on a lot of them. Additionally, Erlang Shen might also be seen in the jungle. Maybe even Heartseeker will be picked up more in the jungle, though so far it seems more like a hunter item to me. Last but not least, let's once again go over the item changes. We have relics that might be picked up a lot, which is really hard to tell right now, but Phantom is on that list for sure. Thorns most likely not. Blink is more likely to be picked up now. Curse a little less. Frenzy is more likely to be picked up. Skull probably the same. Sprint a little less. Sunder more likely to be picked up. And Wrath more likely to be picked up. So there's a lot happening there. Also, Teleport get a nerf, which means that it's more likely to get interrupted while teleporting to a ward. It is slower now, and it's very easy to clear a ward while somebody's teleporting. Then in the item department we also have Emperor's Armor, which could be good or could be bad. We'll have to see. We have Ritual Dagger, which is just a great item overall and will be picked up by so many players. Ensal got a buff as an anti-mage item. Bancroft's Talent has a minor change, but that doesn't really matter. Golden Bow is no longer there. Heartseeker got a buff and will be relevant. Runeforged Hammer might be relevant. We've yet to find out how that exactly works, but most likely it will be relevant on certain characters. And Spectral Armor has a complete overhaul and might be a niche item, for example, for Fenrir with Genji's Guard to reduce the cooldowns as much as possible, but will most likely not be picked up very often. So what to expect? Weaker early hunters, more invades by junglers with Fist of the God, more early objective aggression, and overall a very changed game from what it was before. This goes to a lesser extent for other modes as well. It's mostly the actives here, especially Duel will have major changes because of it, but most changes still take place in Conquest. Thank you guys for watching. Duke Sloth, out.